Well, here it is, finally installed. I know it's been a while. Now, I'm starting out here on purpose because I wanted to show off this one cool feature. It is actually on, it is actually running. It actually just has a timeout that the screen will go black after a certain amount of time, which is really nice when other people are sleeping in this space. But anyway, there it is, GX Touch 50 installed, ready to go. You can see, you can move back and forth between the different screens. It's pretty snappy too. As a matter of fact, that's something I really noticed about this, is it's actually a lot snappier in performance than the Raspberry Pi based version that I have been using before this, so that's definitely a nice improvement. So anyway, proof that it's actually installed. What I'd like to do now is just kind of take you through and show you what I did in my rig to be able to install this where I have it installed here. Alright, best place to start I think here is in the front bay with all the goodies. We'll just start where the wires go here and trace them back to where they plug into the actual unit itself. So if you watched my previous video about my Dream Harvey power system, you probably saw that I've been running the GX software on a Raspberry Pi here. This is just a Raspberry Pi with a standard Raspberry Pi 7-inch touchscreen. And it used to sit right down in here because I'd always planned on putting the Cerbo GX and GX Touch 50 in, and so I didn't really need to wire this back into the rig. So it just kind of sat here. Well, when I installed that, first thing I have to do is unplug all the wires from this. In this case, there were everything was being plugged in via USB. It was USB to VE Direct for the MPPT and the battery monitor, which is down here, and it was plugged in via a VE bus, a USB adapter to get access to the multi-pluses and such. So I've unplugged all of that stuff, and then the yellow cable here is the one that's plugged into the VE bus. That just got routed back up to plug directly into the back of the unit. And then I have a couple of additional VE Direct cables here that I plugged into the two VE Direct devices, the MPPT and the battery monitor. So the way I got these cables here is I drilled a little hole right up here in this corner, the same hole, or right next to, actually I'd say the same hole where I pulled the AC power in from where you plug into the shore and where it goes up into the panel, the breaker panel in the rig to get access to these. I just drilled a hole right next to that, and I pulled the network cable, which we use for the VE bus, the two VE Direct cables, and I pulled an additional power cable through as well. The power cable I just plugged down here into my 12-volt side of the system. Power cable is what plugs into the GX or the Cerbo GX to give power to the actual unit. So that stuff came in here. I made sure everything was still connected with those new cables. And then let me bring you around the corner here, kind of show you in more detail what's happening here. So you can see right up in here behind these cables that are for the ground control system. Here's where all the cables come through to the firewall, and I run them up across the top here on these underneath the rafters, and I've just got them screwed up and wire tied through back beyond this firewall, and then they just work their way on up through the front of the rig. So let's go take a look at the inside of the rig now. Alright, so here I am back on the inside of the rig, and you can see the GX Touch there on the wall. Well, if you'll notice, I've got some cable raceway that runs along here, and then if I lift up underneath, I've got it down underneath here as well. It runs all the way to the ground. That's where I ran the HDMI USB cable that connects the power and signal into this. And then the actual Cerbo GX is actually down here underneath my sink area. So let me pull some stuff out of the way and I'll show you where that is and how that's installed into there. So I'll pull this top drawer out. Put that up here out of the way. I can slide this bottom drawer out. And now you can see down in there is where I installed the Cerbo GX. Thing there with the blinking blue light, that's the Cerbo GX. Now, the reason I put it in here is because I was able to actually get the cables to it the easiest right here by, let me shrink this tripod down here a little bit. You're gonna hear a little bit of noise there, I apologize. I was able to bring it through. I drilled a hole in the wall there. Now sure, I could have come through that hole right there, but this is actually a straighter shot, so I just drilled another little hole through the loo on there. And the cables for from the front come in underneath there to plug into it, and then the cable from here runs down the side. It goes through the wall down there on the bottom and then comes back around through that big hole right there, which then gets me to the actual device itself. So let me move some stuff over here so I can show you this, get the tripod in a way where I can be hands-free and point out stuff. So there we go. It's a little bit wobbly, but that'll do. All right, so because this is down here underneath the sink, and potentially water could drip down on it if there was a big leak, which I hope never happens, obviously, but it could happen. I did a couple of things to kind of account for that. First thing is I put a waterproof breaker right here. So the power actually comes on that power system and it goes in through that waterproof breaker. So that if there's a problem, that breaker can trip without having to trip the rest of the whole DC system. And I could also come in and turn that on and off if I really wanted to. Another thing I did is I built it on this little platform that sits about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch above the floor, so that if there was water that hit the floor, it wouldn't come in to the bottom of the unit. So that's how I accounted for the potential of there being water that would get onto that. So anyway, I've got all that plugged in. The red cable bundled up next to it here, this thing, that's the actual cable that came with it. And then I just wired that into, again, I've got the breaker there for the hot side, and then the other little bus bar there for the negative side. Another advantage, I guess, is that gives me extra power that's brought up here as well, because I need DC power, easy access to DC power up here. But anyway, that's all plugged in. And then across the back is where all of those wires plug in that came in from the front. So the two VE direct, they're up on the top. Matter of fact, let me pull out a little light here and make it a little bit easier to see. There we go, that's probably easier for you guys to see in here. Anyway, across the top here are the two VE direct, and just underneath them is that network cable that is the VE bus. And then over on this side, those two connections right there, that's the USB and HDMI that head up to the actual Cerbo GX unit. Now that cable, the HDMI USB cable there that plugs into the GX unit is not very long. It's probably 6 feet, maybe 2 meters in length, and so you do need to kind of plan for that on where you put this thing. Now it's entirely possible that you could use an HDMI and a USB extension cable to extend that out as well. I haven't researched that to see if that's something that's supported, but it is theoretically possible. I didn't need it in my case because I was able to put everything this close and avoid having to use an extension cable. So that basically shows where everything got installed. Let me come back up top here. All right, so here we are back up top looking at the unit itself. Now, the way the unit works is there's actually the cable that comes right off the back of the actual screen itself here. And then there's a little plastic mounting bracket that the screen pops into. And I think the idea is that you mount that plastic bracket to the wall, you drill a hole where the cables go, and then you fish your cables down through the wall. Now, I didn't want to actually do that in my situation. I'm trying to avoid drilling as many holes as possible just in case I want to change something out. And the fact that I want this thing to be portable, right? When I take when we trade in our rig and we get a new one, I'm taking all of the power system with me. And so I wanted to leave behind as few holes as possible. So what that required me to do is, if you come over here and look, I needed to build a little box that sits behind the actual mounting panel here to lift it up off the wall, so I'd have enough room to get the cable. Basically, I wrap it around here and come out the side of that box and put it through this wire chase. It gave me enough room there that I could get that cable to route without again having to drill a hole in the wall. Another reason I didn't want to drill a hole in the wall is that right down about, if you notice, there's my actual breaker panel here. About 2 inches above that breaker panel is, well, no more about that. It's more about right here, actually. So what is that? A foot above the breaker panel is where the floor for the raised section of the fifth wheel goes. And had I drilled a hole through the wall here, I would have had to somehow figure out how to drill through that floor to get it in as well, or somehow fish it across, but you've got studs in here too. So it was just easier for me to say, you know what, we'll just go ahead and mount that on the surface with that raceway. It's dark color. It actually, I think, works pretty well with the color of the cabinets. And I ran it right along the edge of the backsplash there by the sink in hopes to kind of mask it as well. I know one of the things we've talked about is maybe putting some kind of tile or pseudo tile there on that backsplash, and that could also maybe help blend that in as well. So that is essentially how and why I installed it the way I did there on the wall without drilling holes. That kind of summarizes, I guess, the install. If you'll notice, it's a pretty easy install. One set of holes I had to drill, maybe, well, two if you count the one underneath the sink there, just to get a straighter shot for the wires. And then pull the wires, zip tie them up, and plug everything in. It really was that easy. And once I got it plugged in, it powers right up. I connected it to the Wi-Fi I've got here in my rig, and I did that all through just going through and hitting menu and running through the setup here on the menu, and it was just super easy to do. And again, as I mentioned previously, I really like how responsive and snappy this screen is. Noticeably faster than the Raspberry Pi that I used. And the fact that it dims itself, which the Raspberry Pi didn't do, I like that as well. Because again, people sleeping in this space at night, you don't want this extra big light blaring here. So that really kind of wraps up the install of the Cerbo GX, just showing that I do indeed have it installed and kind of walking you through the install, which, to be honest, was pretty easy. And I got to be also honest, I really wish I would have done this sooner. Honestly, this is so much nicer than what I had before. I really should have done it sooner. All right, well, hope that answers some questions and kind of inspires you on some things you can do. If you haven't already, like and subscribe, and keep coming back. I am planning on producing a lot more RV solar and power oriented things here now that things are ramping down with the pandemic and we're starting to able to get out and do more things. So get on the road, have a good time, and talk to you later.